If we're being honest, most of us didn't walk into marriage thinking, all right, let's figure out roles, unity, and servant leadership. We walked in thinking, we love each other. This is going to be great. And then somewhere along the way, we realized love is real, but so are differences, expectations, and those why do you like it like that moments. Whether it's how you load the dishwasher, make decisions, or handle stress, it doesn't take long to discover that marriage isn't just about feelings, it's about alignment. And that's where God's design comes in. In this week's episode, we're diving into what it really looks like to live out unity and complementarity in a biblical marriage, not as rigid roles or power struggles, but as a Christ-centered partnership that actually works in real life. We're talking about how two people with different strengths, perspectives, and personalities can come together, move in the same direction, and reflect something bigger than themselves. Because the marriage shifts from me versus you to us for God's purpose. Everything changes. And trust me, this is where things start to click. The tension starts to ease, and your marriage begins to look less like a competition and more like a team worth rooting for. Welcome to Marriage Life and More. This is a podcast about marriage, Bible, and book studies, and we interview people that have inspiring stories. I'm Daniel Moore, your host, and sitting over here next to me is my beautiful co-host, my wife, Michelle.
Hey, hey.
Thank you guys for joining us this week. If you're not familiar with our show, check out our website at marriagelifeandmore.com for our platforms. Our YouTube and Rumble links are there. We're also on the Christian podcasting app Edify, and we're on your Alexa and Google smart devices. You can also visit us on social on Facebook, Instagram, and X at CT Gap Online. If you're a fan of our show, please subscribe and feel free to leave a comment on our platforms. Give us a thumbs up or a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, and we'd be thankful to you for doing that. Well, last week we started off a new episode, and we were talking about roles in marriage, because we know that in a marriage, it's not just one person. You have two people, and these two people have to know how to get along with each other, and we both have to know what our role is, and in a godly way, because, you know, I can sit here and make up a role for you.
I bet you'd like that.
Tell you what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And, you know, that's super easy. We can all do that for each other if we just sit down and try it.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
And so we're trying to look at this in a little bit different way. We're studying our book that we've got out. It's Marriage as a Mission. And if you want to get a copy of that and follow along, you can go to our website and pick up a copy of that. On Amazon, we have our study guide there as well. And you can follow along with us as we're getting into almost about the middle of this study at this point. But we have reached this week to talk about the roles in marriage. And this week, we're going to finish up that episode with part 2.
God's design for leadership in marriage is rooted in something the world doesn't always understand. And if we're honest, something we don't always naturally lean toward either: servant-heartedness. When God talks about roles and authority in marriage, especially the husband's role as the spiritual leader, he's not talking about dominance, control, or my way or the highway. He's pointing us to something far more powerful and far more challenging. He's pointing us to Jesus. In Matthew 20, verses 26 through 28, Jesus completely flips the definition of leadership. Greatness isn't found in being served, but in serving. That means the model for a husband isn't a CEO barking orders, it's a savior washing feet. It's leadership that gets low, not loud. Leadership that sacrifices, not demands. In God's kingdom, the strongest leader is the one who serves the most. And that changes everything. Because when you hear head of the home, it's easy to picture authority as control. But in Scripture, authority comes with responsibility. Ephesians 5:25 doesn't say, husbands, make sure your wives follow you. It says, husbands, Love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's not a power statement. That's a sacrifice statement. And that's so good.
Yes, as we get started this week, I think that we've already hit on some really good points here that you've just shared with us. And I know that you have, this, as we've discussed before, most of you that know our testimony, most of you know that both of us have been married before. And, you've experienced a marriage where you didn't have much say-so.
Right.
And when we got married, we've actually had our moments where we tried to, be authoritative in different areas and, probably tried to tell each other what to do at times or whatever, because we weren't always cohesive really either,
right.
in our relationship. But as things have changed and as things have moved forward and we've allowed God to come in to the mix and start changing the way that you and I do marriage, it's a whole different scenario now.
It is.
Than what it used to be.
It is.
And, how does it make you feel, to feel some of that freedom that you feel like you have at this point to be the wife, to be a co-leader in the home, to actually feel like, do you feel like at this point that you actually have some say-so, that things that you say actually does matter? Kind of how do you look at that at this point in your marriage compared to where you've been in the past?
I look at it as, in the past, there was no say-so. Yes, I have say-so, but the difference in the past too, even if I did have a say-so, the head of the household was not a spiritual believer. Mm-hmm. So it would have been extremely hard to even kind of gear that marriage toward where we were supposed to be.
Right.
Now, you are the head of the household. However, you love God as much as you possibly can, and I know that. So when you give me those choices, I take that to heart. Mm-hmm. And, going before God, praying that I don't lead you astray in a situation or whatever when when you've given me that choice. But it makes me feel like I'm important, that you respect and you really look at what my response is going to be in that decision, and that it matters to the utmost of you because you love me that much.
Yeah.
And you put that much trust because my heart is right with God now versus before. I just throw an answer out there. And we, like you said, we went back and forth.
Yeah.
But now it's like we both really trust each other. And, we really just, if you say this and I'm like, okay, your heart's right. This is where, now don't get me wrong. There are times that we call each other out. Mm-hmm. If you've asked me a question and I give, and you're like, well, what are your thoughts is this? Well, sometimes you can tell when someone's thoughts are based on feelings. And if you're like, okay, Michelle, what's your say-so on this? You're going to know if my response is based on feelings because you know me enough and you know my heart.
Yeah.
And I feel like, as you're in a marriage, if you know your spouse and you know what they would normally say, because it's going to be Christ-centered.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then you're like, hey, and what you're really good, is this about feelings? Yeah. Are you answering to some feelings or are you being serious? And it's like, oh, yeah, okay, and then we talk about it.
Yeah. And I know from my aspect of it as a husband, it takes a load off of me because I've been in a situation before where I feel like I was the one making the complete decision. And if everything failed and blew up, it was going to be my fault. And I don't like that. It's like, I don't know how, guys that live their life like that in their marriages where they completely rule the roost and they never give their spouse an opportunity to ever make choices and decisions and help carry some of that load. I don't know how they function and how they even make it.
You want me to tell you how they function? Because if something wasn't right, it's still that spouse's fault.
It's true. They play the blame game.
Yep.
They don't take responsibility for anything if it
doesn't
fails.
matter if you say something or you don't. You're going to be the one that's going to be held responsible for it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we don't want that.
No.
It needs to be where both of us can come in together, make this choice, make this big decision, whatever it may be, pray about it, you know, and
There is no maybe. You should be praying about
get God's input in the whole thing. And then if it goes down in flames, we both take responsibility for that and we learn from it.
And you communicate what went wrong and going forward, what you guys could do better as a couple, because we've been there. And if you don't take responsibility, the other partner is going to be, well, like, why should I say anything?
Yep. And, you know, that little statement, the strongest leader is the one who serves the most. That says a lot, because usually the people that are really good leaders, they are always usually the ones that will actually jump in and do something. They're the ones that they don't just stand on the sideline and just bark orders. They get into the down and dirty with the people that's doing the things. And I know for myself, I would much rather follow somebody that's willing to get their hands dirty just like me, rather than look at me as like, oh, well, you're the low person on totem pole, so you get to get your hands dirty while I sit here and watch you. You know, I respect that person that actually jumps in.
I think that's a very good, solid point, because you should lead by example.
Yes, very much so. And so I know with both of us, and we've talked about this before too, this is why we get along so well in our marriage, because if we come into the home at any given moment and we see that something needs done, we'll both jump in and do it, whether if it's together or if it's something I see and I'm like, well, I'm not doing nothing right now. I'll just go over and do it.
Right.
You know, I don't say, oh, that's Michelle's job. You know, I'm just going to,
he knows if he said that, I'd punch him in the face.
That's right.
I haven't said that in a long time. It actually felt
that violence would come out.
But no. And, you know, I came from a marriage where it was solely 100% my responsibility to cook, to clean, to raise the children, to work full time. I mean, when I say everything, and some of you women will resonate with that. And, you know, it is tough. It is hard. But, you know, you just got to stay, you know, true to yourself. And the fact that Dan, once we got married, I think I was shocked at how much he did help me. And, you know, I look at it now and I think I'm extremely spoiled, as my son would say. Mom, you're so spoiled. It's not even funny. And I'm thinking, no, really, honestly, he's taken his role as a husband to a level that it should be.
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah, I may be spoiling some, but really, honestly, I hope he learns what a husband should be and what a husband should look like. Because in all reality, it is shared responsibilities. It shouldn't be specifically one spouse to do it all.
Yeah. And so when we're looking at that Ephesians 5:25, that verse you just shared, where it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. You know, that kind of love looks like patience when you're misunderstood. And it looks like listening when you rather fix the problem in 30 seconds, which a lot of us guys like to do.
Yes.
It looks like choosing connection over being right. And sometimes being right feels really important in the moment. You know, it's like you have those moments when you're the one that wants to take the lead and say, okay, this is it, and I'm right on this, and just accept it and move on. But, you know, we have to lay down our preferences, our pride, and sometimes even that last slice of pizza for the good of your wife and your home.
That's right.
As a husband, you know, we've got to make sure that if we're going to, you know, be able to get along in our home and actually have that loving relationship between each other, like the Bible describes it should be, then it's always give and take.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that we both help each other out to the fullest extent that we can.
Right.
We don't push everything off on one spouse or the other. And that's not what these roles are all about.
Right.
The Bible sets these roles as a foundation of what God expects out of us and the expectations that he has. But he does that with from the side, knowing that we're going to do everything that we can to help each other. And we're both going to feel important. Mm-hmm. We're both going to feel like we belong in this relationship.
What is it, the saying, happy wife?
Happy life.
Happy life.
That's right.
Just remember that.
Yep. That rings true. But biblical leadership doesn't elevate you above your spouse. It calls you to lay your life down for them. And I really like that, because that's what Jesus did for us.
Yeah.
And throughout the Bible, marriage is always likened to our relationship with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And what Jesus did for us, that's what we should be doing for each other, regardless of what comes up or what the situation may be. We should be in 100%, ready to give our life for our spouse or whatever it may be. And that's how we should look at our relationship in a biblical way. So wives, your role in this dynamic is just as important and just as intentional. Ephesians 5:22-24 calls you to respond with trust and support, not because you're less capable or less valuable, but because you're choosing unity over competition. It's not about losing your voice. It's about aligning your heart with God's design. And if we're really honest about that, that's not always easy either. I'm trying to, weigh those balances. But I do think that when we look at this, aligning our heart with God's design, it seems to me a lot of times that the wives are a lot better at doing that kind of thing. They really can radiate the heart of Christ. I think a lot better sometimes than husbands kind of do. As husbands, we're kind of a little rough around the edges sometimes, and probably a little bit more matter of fact in some things. And so we can come off kind of brazen and kind of harsh at times, I think, where a lot of times the women, because you're like this, they're tenderhearted. You're empathetic. You try to, align yourself with whatever's going on in that moment. You try to get inside of that to understand what is going on right now. And, that's the heart of Christ, getting into the middle of all that and trying to figure that stuff out and then come to those solutions,
right,
whatever they may be, in doing that. Sometimes as wives, your husband's leadership won't look polished. Sometimes it's going to look like, I think this is what we should do. Maybe, it's like we don't really have a good, there's times that I'm very questionable when I make a choice and a decision. And so that's when I come to you and we'll bounce ideas and stuff, because I don't know it all. And I'll be the first to admit that. And so there's times that we both have to make those decisions and stuff, because what you have to say will probably, bring up something I never thought about, and it helps us make those decisions. And in those moments, respect becomes a choice, not just a feeling. It's choosing to come alongside your husband, speak life and build him up, not tear him down while he's still figuring it out.
I think that's so important for people to hear.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to pick out people. Well, one, you're going to be critical to the person you love the most.
And, a lot of times, wives don't give their husbands the benefit of the doubt. And if it takes too long to make a choice or to make a decision, they might sometimes start kind of tearing at their husband a little bit and belittling, aren't you ever going to make this decision? Can you not make choices? You can start seeing some of that attitude kind of come out. But I think we can both do that to each other, though, too.
Right.
As far as that goes, you can think of it like this: servant leadership and supportive partnership are two sides of the same coin. One doesn't work well without the other.
That's good.
So if you're going to be in servant leadership, if you're going to be a servant and be a leader in your home, you've also got to be able to support partnership, because leaders are nobody if they don't have anybody to lead. There's just no way that can happen. And so there's times when I'm a leader in our home, and I feel like there's times when you do a better job of leading, depending on the scenario, depending on the situation. And so we both have to be willing to flip between those two roles. One time I'm a leader, next time you're a leader, one time I'm a partner, one time you're a partner. And that's how that cohesion starts working between the two of us. So share the next point there with us.
Yeah, a husband's love sets the tone, and a wife's respect builds the rhythm. But here's when culture tends to get twisted. The moment you bring up words like authority, headship, or submission, people start bracing for impact. Why? Because the world has seen leadership abused. It's seen authority used to control, manipulate, and harm, and because of that, it often rejects the biblical model altogether. But God's design is nothing like that. It's not about control. It's about commitment. It's not about being the boss. It's about bearing responsibility. It's not about power. It's about purpose. And when culture looks at a husband serving his wife, sacrificing for his family, stepping in to help after a long day instead of checking out, They may call it weak. It might joke about he's whipped.
Heard that before.
Yep. Meanwhile, when a wife chooses to respect and support her husband's leadership, culture might label her as outdated or lacking independence. But what God calls strength, the world often misunderstands.
And I find it interesting, that culture that we live in today, how they do approach this.
Yeah.
Because we're even not just putting marriages aside right at the moment, just in the workplace. Look how employees treat their bosses when it comes to being an authority and submitting to the rules, submitting to the culture of the place that you work for, how they treat the headship of the place. It's like there's not a lot of respect these days in a lot of different scenarios.
I think there's a lot of entitlement.
A lot of entitlement, yeah. So the world does look at this very differently now. And so it does make us as Christians, when we're trying to live the biblical model and work through authority in the way that God wants us to do that, I think it does make us look kind of weird sometimes. And then when you bring this into the marriage scenario, there's so much pride in marriages these days that when couples that are full of pride actually see a couple that's trying to live biblically and being submissive to each other and sharing authority and all the things that the Bible wants us to do, they have a tendency to look and, make joking comments. He's whipped, or, she's got him wrapped around her little finger.
We've heard that multiple times.
Oh, yeah. It's like, no, we're being a husband and wife.
Yeah.
That's
a very good point.
Yeah. It's
very good point.
You have to put that stuff to the side, because if you get your feelings, if you wear your feelings on your shoulder and things like that really bother you, that can really affect your marriage also. There's times that even guys, when they get together, and if they start talking to each other and start talking smack about, the guy being whipped or whatever, some guys can really take that in a bad way and they can change the way they treat their wives, to look tough to their buddies, And that's not the way it should be. As husbands, we should be taking up for our wives and saying, no, it's not this way because I love her. There's no other way, no other question about that. It's nothing about being whipped or anything. I made this choice to be in this covenant with her. Yeah. I love her. She loves me, and our marriage works.
Yeah. And, as you're saying that, hopefully you're around a group of friends that encourages that. If you're around some Christian buddies, and if they're saying things like that, maybe it's time to stand up and say, hey, this is biblical. And why aren't you living it out?
Yep.
And so hopefully, if you do have Christian friends that are not in agreement with you, you do stand up for your marriage.
Yeah. You should never let anybody down talk your relationship and that marriage that you're in, because that is an institution that's been put there by God, and God has a purpose for your union. And that's Satan when he uses these people from the outside. It may not look like that, and they may totally disagree with you, but that is Satan trying to get in the middle of all of that when these people from the outside are making these comments and trying to disrupt something that God's created, the beautiful thing that God's created. And as we, continue with that thought, servant leadership may look weak to the world, but it's powerful in the kingdom.
Yeah.
And, if we look at this for a second, picture a husband coming home after a long day. He walks in and the house is a little chaotic. Kids are loud. Laundry is multiplying like it has a life of its own. And dinner is still a big question mark. This guy now has a choice. He can disappear into the couch, scroll his phone, and mentally clock out, or he can step in. Not because he's told to, and not because he's keeping score, but because he sees his wife, he values her, and he understands that loving her well is part of his leadership. So instead, he helps with dinner. He folds laundry, even if he does it wrong in some ways, because, there is a right and a wrong way to fold towels.
Oh, we know that.
Oh, yeah.
After 20-some years, we finally got it figured out,
That's right. He may go in there and wrangle the kids into bedtime. And in that moment, he's not losing authority. He's actually living it out.
Yeah.
That's what servant leadership looks like in real life. And when a wife sees that kind of love and responds with encouragement, trust, and respect, guess what? Something powerful happens in the home.
Yes.
Walls come down, unity grows, and peace settles in. And why is that? Because both are living out their roles. And it's not perfect. There's not a relationship out there that's perfect, but it's intentionality.
And if you're not doing any of that, and as Dan was reading for that example, let me tell you, try it. See what your wife does. And if she's nitpicking everything that you just tried, she's being critical, and she needs to stop that. Because when Dan tries something and to help me in any way, shape, or form, and let me tell you, when I try to help him do certain things, I know 100% it's not right. Because there is a lot of things, and he's got a lot of talents that I do not. But you know what? Never once have I ever heard him say, well, you're doing that wrong. And same as me. Now I'm a little nitpicky with some of the, like loading the dishwasher or something like that. I'm like, well, you can put more in there. Let's get all this in there. But not like in a critical way.
Right.
But wives, be appreciative. Because honestly, it takes a lot for a man to work all day and to come home and do that. Even if it's his role, he needs that encouragement and that, hey, thank you. Thank you for doing that. I see you. I appreciate that.
And remember, there's a lot of wives out there that don't. Their husbands don't do that.
Oh, I used to get told at work all the time, well, he's definitely one of a kind. And I'm like, yeah, and I know that. And I'm very thankful for that, because it didn't used to be like that. And so and I talk about Dan all the time. People probably get tired of me, but I'm like, oh, my husband does that. And they're like, he does what? And I'm like, yeah, he does that for me. But, yes, I'm spoiled, but I'm also thankful I have a God-fearing, loving, Jesus-loving man.
Yeah.
That pours into me too. And that does help. But just think about that. If you have a husband or a wife and they're needing help, just jump in there.
Yeah.
They're going to appreciate that.
And I'll tell you, the more that you help, the more likely you're going to be that your spouse is going to want to jump in and help too.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you're both just doing everything together. And there's no quarrels, no questions about, who's going to do this or who's going to do that. It does not matter anymore.
No.
Just get in there and do it.
Yeah.
And you'll find out that those fights and arguments that you have because you feel like one spouse is doing way more than the other and being taken advantage of, you'll notice those don't happen anymore. And it's all happening that way without even thinking about it, because it just becomes your lifeblood and how you are. So go ahead and share the next 2 points there with us.
Healthy marriages aren't built on power struggles. They're built on mutual sacrifice. The truth is, servant leadership is upside down compared to everything the culture teaches. The world promotes promote yourself, but Jesus says deny yourself. The world says take control, but Jesus says take up your cross. And in marriage, that difference shows up every single day in how you speak, how you respond, how you forgive, and how you serve. But here's the beauty of it. When a marriage reflects that kind of love, it becomes a living picture of the gospel. It shows the world what Christ's love actually looks like, tangible, sacrificial, and real. And yes, it does take humility. And yes, it does take grace. And yes, it takes choosing each other again and again, even on the days when you don't feel like it. But a home built on a servant leadership, that's a home filled with peace, respect, and joy that isn't easily shaken. When love leads and humility follows, marriage becomes a reflection of heaven. So, no, God's design isn't outdated. It's not oppressive. It's not restrictive. It's redemptive. And when both husband and wife lean into it, serving, supporting, loving, and growing together, they don't just build a good marriage, they build one that actually reflects Jesus.
Yeah, that first point there, healthy marriages aren't built on power struggles. They're built on mutual sacrifice. We know what happens when marriages are built on power struggles. You don't get anywhere. And nothing gets done because it's just like when you have a power struggle going on in a home like that, it's usually just constant chaos because each spouse can't get over themselves long enough to get things done and make sure that the duties of the home and everything's taken care of and, everything's put into place like it should be. And so those power struggles are never going to get you anywhere.
No.
And it for sure isn't going to build the love between the two of you.
Yeah.
It's actually going to probably do the opposite. It's going to damage that love and that relationship. That closeness is probably going to be non-existent because you're going to be constantly, fighting back and forth with each other. But when we sacrifice and we put everything out there and we let each other know that, this is nothing that you can't do or nothing that I can't do. We can do this together. We're on equal level playing fields here. That's when that relationship does start to grow. It starts to look very redemptive. It starts looking like something God has created at that point. So I just think that's really cool how all that works and how that all comes together. So as we continue here, we're going to talk a little bit about unity and complementarity. And that in a biblical marriage are a lot like two hands working together. They're not identical, but they're designed to move in sync. One doesn't try to outdo the other, and neither one works well alone. That's the picture that God gives us for marriage. Not one person doing everything, not one person controlling everything, but two people embracing their God-given roles to build something together. Because at the end of the day, marriage isn't about me versus you. It's about us, a unified Christ-centered team. When both husband and wife understand their roles and actually live them out, something shifts. It stops being a competition over who's right, who's doing more, or who's carrying the weight. Instead, it becomes cooperation. You begin pulling in the same direction, even if you're contributing in different ways. And that kind of unity, it doesn't just feel good, it preaches. It shows the world what godly love actually looks like in real life. And I think, as you were talking earlier, when you talk to, the people at work or whatever, and they're so shocked about our relationship and how I do things for you and that kind of thing in a roundabout way. And of course, we're not doing this intentionally to be, people to see all of that or whatever. But behind the scenes, that does preach. It's like whenever I do what a husband's actually supposed to do, and then you love that, so you're more than happy to share with other people the kind of marriage that you have and the relationship that you have. And, I do the same thing because, you bend over backwards to do your part in our home. And, so I'm out there telling my friends and people, as it comes up about our relationship and whatever. And for once, people aren't hearing about a bad marriage where two people are just competing and trying to be better than the other one, And I think that in some ways that kind of preaches to them to maybe up their game a little bit in their relationship, hopefully. And maybe that they would work on having a marriage similar to that because that's what God wants us to do.
Yeah.
And so that unity and that complementarity, when you put that into action, it really changes the whole dynamic of what your marriage is. Go ahead and share the next point there with us.
Unity in marriage isn't thinking the same, it's moving the same direction. Let's make this practical. Picture a season where a husband is working full-time and the wife is at home with young kids. He's providing financially, she's nurturing the home, keeping the little humans alive, fed, and hopefully not drawing on the walls with a permanent marker. And if they are, well, that's what paint's for, right? Different roles, same mission. He's providing, she's shaping. Both are building the same home. Now imagine if the unity breaks down, if the husband sees his role as, I bring the paycheck, so I'm done. Or the wife begins to undervalue or resist his leadership. the things start to crack. Not at all at once, but slowly. Tensions build, misunderstanding grows, and before long, you're not working together. You're working against each other. But when both spouses recognize the value of what the other brings, when they support each other, speak life into each other, and honor each other's roles, that's when peace starts to settle in. That's when the home feels ordered, not chaotic. That's when the marriage begins to reflect God's design.
And something you mentioned in this section is something that is one of my pet peeves. And that is when you do have a stay-at-home parent and the other one works.
Yeah.
And then they try to say, this is mine. I make the money. I pay the bills. Everything has to do with me. You get what I let you have. You get whatever's left over, whatever that whole argument is.
Or I'm not helping with the kids because I worked all day. That's what you're there for.
Yeah, it's, that's a cop-out. I mean, that's lazy. That's worthless. I'm just going to get to the point with it. That is not how God designed this. And, whenever parents, when there is a stay-at-home parent, hopefully there's a good reason for that.
God bless
whatever that may be. And that is a full-time job.
It is a full-time.
If you have kids.
Additional full-time.
Yep.
Because you never get away.
No. And so that doesn't, the spouse that's working at that point, that does not relieve them of their duty to be a husband or a wife, depending on which one's staying home, and still help. I mean, that does not relieve any of that. And so, each couple knows their own dynamic. If there's a stay-at-home parent involved in the relationship, that's up to you to evaluate why that's taking place and why that's happening, if it's something that's needed or whatever it may be. But if you do come to that decision where you feel like that there should be a stay-at-home parent, and that's how that your household's going to run, that's how all of that's going to work, you still fall underneath these same guidelines as married couples who actually work two jobs. You still have to be unified with each other. You still have to help each other around the home. You still need to share, make sure your roles are still the same. There's nothing that changes. And too many times I see where, some of the spouses that work and make the money or whatever, they're okay and agree to the stay-at-home parent, but then they gripe about it constantly. And they belittle that parent that's staying at home and make them feel like they're worthless and they're not contributing and they don't have anything because everything is the other spouse's because they're the one that makes all the money. There's just a lot of stuff that goes into that that's not biblical and not godly. And I think that there needs to be some realignment there.
I was getting ready to say that the way I was thinking about that is perfectly as your heart's not right with Jesus. Mm-hmm. Because in all reality, if you're taking it out or you're saying things like that or you're doing things, you are definitely not aligned with the heart of God.
No, not at all. And a healthy marriage isn't built on equal roles. It's built on equal commitment to the same purpose. Complementarity also shows up in decision-making, and this is where things can get real for a lot of couples. Ephesians 5:23 says, the husband's the head of the home, but that doesn't mean he operates like a one-man board meeting taking executive decisions with zero input. A wise, godly husband leans in, listens, and values his wife's voice deeply.
It's funny because I was getting ready to say something about Proverbs, and I think you getting ready to mention that. So yep. I'm glad you're getting ready to read this.
Yep, 31 verse 11 in Proverbs paints a powerful picture. The heart of her husband trusts in her. That kind of trust doesn't happen in silence. It happens in conversation. It's built in those late night talks, those what do you think we should do moments, and even in those occasional disagreements where you both have strong opinions and really neither of you is wrong. They're just different.
Yeah.
And those conversations sometimes take longer than expected. What starts as a 5-minute discussion can turn into a 45-minute deep dive with side stories, emotional layers, and at least one that's not what I meant. But that process, that's where unity is formed. Because unity isn't one person always giving in. It's both people moving forward together, even if one is ultimately leading the direction.
Good.
Godly leadership listens before it leads, and unity grows where voices are valued. We also see complementarity in spiritual growth. A husband stepping into leadership by initiating prayer, opening scripture, or setting a Christ-like tone in the home. It's not about checking a spiritual box. That's servant leadership in action. It's saying, as for me and my house, we're going to follow the Lord, as it says in Joshua 24:15, and then actually living that out. And wives, your roles in that is just as powerful. Encouraging him when he's trying, even if it's a little awkward at first, speaking truth when needed, discipling your children, and using your spiritual gifts to build up your home. That matters very deeply, because the truth is spiritual leadership in marriage isn't a solo act. It's a partnership. Both parents, the both spouses, the husband and the wife, need to be on the same page spiritually in order for this to work out well. So go ahead and share the next two with us there.
Yeah, a Christ-centered home is built when both spouses invest spiritually, even if they do it differently. And all of this unity, this complementarity, it's about more than just making daily life run smoother. It tells a bigger story. Ephesians 5:31-32 reminds us that marriage points to something greater, the relationship between Christ and his church. That means your marriage isn't just personal, it's purposeful. It's a living, breathing reflection of the gospel. When a husband leads with love and a wife responds with trust, it mirrors Christ's love for the church. When both walk in humility, grace, and unity, it becomes a testimony, whether you realize it or not. Your neighbors see it, your kids feel it, and the world notices it. A unified marriage doesn't just bless your home, it becomes a witness to everyone watching. And that's why this matters so much. Because when you embrace God's design, when you lean into unity instead of fighting for control, when you value the complementarity instead of comparing roles, you're not just strengthening your marriage, you're glorifying God. You're building something that lasts, and you're leaving behind a legacy of faith, stability, and love that echoes far beyond your own lifetime.
So I think as we, start to get to the wrap up here of this episode, this is just a good way to finish it.
It's good.
Because, again, even if we're looking at this biblically, you're not just being a wife because the Bible tells you to do certain things.
Right.
I'm not just being a husband because the Bible tells me to be a husband a certain way. We're doing this because our relationship matters.
Yeah.
The unity that me and you have between each other, it matters. Whenever we have an opportunity to share our experience with other couples that are fighting some things we've been through already, and just because of our story, they change and things get better for them, that matters. And I think that's God's whole plan and purpose for us as married couples, is that whenever we fulfill the roles in the way that he has created them to be filled, he knows that it's not just going to only affect you and me. It's not only going to allow us to have a great marriage, but that's going to eventually pour out into elsewhere.
Yeah.
And other people can actually feed off of what we have.
Yeah.
And then they can start seeing changes in their own marriage if they'll apply the things they see us doing.
Yeah.
And I think that means a lot.
That's good.
It really does. So marriage works best when two people stop competing for position and start committing to purpose. So whether if you're out there navigating busy seasons, big decisions, or just figuring out whose turn it is to take out the trash, remember this. As we've said so many times, you're on the same team.
Woohoo!
And when you live like it, your marriage becomes something truly powerful, something beautifully aligned with the heart of God. So as we wrap up this week's episode, and part 2, actually, of this episode, we'll be getting on to a different subject next week, which is going to be a really good one. Just want to remind you that you can visit our website at marriagelifeandmore.com. And if you love this podcast, love these episodes, please subscribe and share. That helps our podcast to grow and helps us get out to people that need to hear these episodes, because we know that people struggle in marriages everywhere. And if something that can be said in one of these episodes would help them, that's what this is all about. And you become a part of that whenever another marriage makes something happen and goes in a good positive direction because of something that you shared with them. So we just ask you to do that, and we thank you for it in advance. And again, you can check all that out at marriagelifeandmore.com. So to wrap up this week's episode, here's the takeaway. Unity in marriage isn't something you stumble into. It's something you choose again and again. It's choosing us over me, even when you're tired, even when you disagree, and even when you're both pretty convinced that your way makes more sense. At the end of the day, you're not in opposing teams. You're building the same life, serving the same God, and moving toward the same purpose. So as we go on into this week, take a step back and ask yourself, how can I support my spouse better? How can I contribute to unity instead of tension? Maybe it's listening a little longer, encouraging a little more, or letting go of the need to win that one argument you've been holding on to since, well, we're not going to bring that back up right now. Small choices like that are what build strong Christ-centered marriages over time. So remember, your marriage is more than just your relationship. It's a reflection of the gospel. And when two people commit to walking in humility, love, and purpose together, it becomes something powerful, something steady, and something that points straight back to Jesus. So Michelle and I, we're cheering you on, and we'll catch you next week in our next new episode here on Marriage Life and More. Well, that's all for this week, and we pray that your marriage is stronger and your walk with God is closer after this episode. This is an extension of Connecting the Gap Ministries, and we pray that you have a blessed week.